I'm here to give you all a welcome to our speaker series. I'm Katrina Fenlon. I'm the director of the Center for Archival Futures, which we affectionately call CAFE. And I'm an assistant professor at the College of Information Studies here at the University of Maryland. For those who haven't been with us before, CAFE was established in 2021 to support interdisciplinary research, hands-on learning, and community partnerships at the intersection of archives and digital curation. And our mission is to collaborate with diverse communities and information professionals to democratize and preserve our records of knowledge and culture. This speaker series is our flagship event. It's held on the first Wednesday of each month during the semester. We host speakers who are really at the cutting edge of archives and digital curation research and practice in a wide variety of institutions, disciplines, sectors, and areas of work. And you can find recordings of our previous illustrious guest speakers at the CAFE event page. I'll pop a link in the chat, or one of my colleagues will in a moment. Before I hand off the mic to our hosts for today to introduce our amazing speaker, let me first acknowledge that we are beaming in from College Park, Maryland, which is located on the ancestral territories of the Piscataway, Nacotchtank, and their indigenous kin and neighbors. As members of the University of Maryland, which is a land-grant university, let's also acknowledge the 202,000 acres of stolen Indigenous land distributed to the university under the Morrill Act in 1862, and the separation that these and many other acts of colonialism and assimilation and genocide, including some acts of archival collecting, generated between Indigenous peoples and their homelands. We honor the continued power and resilience of Indigenous communities and nations, and celebrate the collaborative and decolonizing work now taking place in our collections at our institutions. We also further acknowledge the University of Maryland's connections to slavery and to generations of racialized trauma rooted in the institution. And we at CAFE are committed to supporting restorative history for this institution and reparative and restorative justice work in knowledge institutions broadly. As far as what's coming up at CAFE, this is our last public event for the fall semester. We'll start back up in the spring on February 1st with a presentation from, I believe, from the National Archives, Moving Image Archivist, who will be talking to us about UFOs. And on that exciting note, I will pass the mic off to Dr. Diana Marsh and Lydia Curlis to introduce our speaker for today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lydia Curlis. I'm a PhD student and student member of CAFE. I am very honored today to introduce our speaker, Lorén M. Spears, a member of the Narragansett Nation. She is the executive director of the Tomaquag Museum and holds a master's in education and received a Doctor of Humane Letters honoris causa in 2017 from the University of Rhode Island and Doctor of Education honoris causa from Roger Williams University in 2021. She's an author, artist, and shares her cultural knowledge with the public through museum programs. She has written curriculum, poetry, and narratives published in a variety of publications, such as Dawnland Voices, an anthology of Indigenous writing of New England, Through Our Eyes, an Indigenous view of Mashpog Pond, The Pursuit of Happiness, an Indigenous view, From Slaves to Soldiers, the First Rhode Island Regiment in the American Revolution, co-edited a new edition of A Key into the Language of America by Roger Williams, co-authored, as we have always done, Decolonizing the Tomaquag Museum's collective management policy, published in collections, a journal for museum and archive professionals, and an author in Repair Sustainable Design Futures.
We'd like to offer Lorén a special congratulations for her recent leadership award at the Association of Tribal Archives, Libraries, and Museums, or ATOM, which is the most prominent gathering of professionals in this area. And that celebrated her work at the Tomaquag Museum, which has received an IMLS National Medal under her leadership, as well as her tireless work to empower Native youth and educate the public on Native history, culture, arts, and environments. So we're very, very lucky to be hosting such an important leader in this area today. Her talk today, entitled Belongings, Archives, and Indigenizing Design, will share the strategies around decolonizing and indigenizing policies, processes, and design of collections and archives in her museum, including plans for a new museum campus. So we'll hand it off to you, Lorén.
Askwi kwasen katapatash kanupiam at aki at Narragansett nin Narragansett nahantik natasawis Lorén Spears English nin makasani pashao at Narragansett. So first, thank you for that very kind welcome, and welcome to the homelands of the Narragansett Nation here in what we now call Rhode Island. And I said my traditional name is Makasani Pashao, and I am Lorén Spears, as you heard, the executive director of Tomaquag Museum, and I am an enrolled citizen of the Narragansett Nation, but I am also of Niantic descent as well. So I'm looking forward to sharing with you today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can get started and make sure we have plenty of time for, oh, you always get to see my grandbaby. This is always the most important little face. This is Minakisu Miquin, who is my first grandson, my first grandchild. I always do this. Should have started that from the beginning. There we go. So we're going to think about our belongings and our archives and how we indigenize design here at Tomaquag Museum and with our partner organizations that we work with as well. So I thought I would share quickly our team because it's a small team here. We have our collections manager, who happens to be Anthony Bells, who's our only staff in collections and archive until very recently. We just transitioned our archival fellow to an archival staff person. And then we have quite a few archives and collections student interns and fellows that we utilize throughout the year, teaching them and also using their youth and energy and excitement to get a lot of things done. Most recently, for a small organization that was founded in 1958 under the leadership of Eva Butler, who was an anthropologist and scholar, and Princess Redwing, who was an educator, Native American culture bearer from the Narragansett and Wampanoag community, and just an advocate all around for Indigenous rights. She was born in the late 1800s and lived through the almost late 1900s until the 1980s. And so in those early days, they told our story in a very grassroots way. And so they didn't always have, I see a typo there. They didn't always have a quote unquote professional team of people over our 64 years of existence. We are very new in having a collections manager and to having archivists on staff and not from our board volunteers and our staff doubling up doing other roles that are not their normal role. With that being said, this year we did a complete inventory with support of 6 summer fellows and 4 additional fall term and spring term fellows, and completed a full inventory of our about somewhere between 7,000 and 8,000 belongings that are in our tangible collection. And in our archives, our estimate is well over 100,000 pieces of archival materials, everything from photographs to newspaper clippings to handwritten letters to maps, and the list goes on. And so just to give you a little idea, we also have a collections committee that's made up of board, staff, and experts in the field that have relationships with Tomaquag Museum that support that work. So in our archives, as I said, there's lots of different things, including speeches and music, films, audios. We have a ton of audio recordings, and we've been recently doing a lot in creating inventories for those audio recordings so that we as a museum can know what's on them that we might use in exhibitions here or in education programming and things like that, but also so that researchers that come and use our collection would have better access to what is on these audios and have a timestamp so that folks can find them. We also have recently done quite a few finding aids, and our ultimate goal is to push out many more of them that are in process to put them on our website so that folks can access those materials. and to be able to tell our stories using our archives and collections always, over all our years, but even more so as we've gotten a better handle on our amazing collection, to use them in our exhibits that we're developing here at our current Tomaquag Museum, but also in planning for our new museum and the much larger exhibit work that we're going to be doing with our exhibit design firm. This is just to give you some quick blips. This is, I happen to like this. It's such a little tiny thing that it's one of those things that we always talk about. Well, does it belong in collections or does it belong in archives? Because it's a document, but it's on birch bark. These are birch bark business cards, handwritten by Princess Redwing, probably back in the 30s or 40s. In this image, you heard about my honorary doctorates. This is an image of her from our archives receiving her honorary doctorate of Humane Affairs in 1975 from the University of Rhode Island, which also is a land grant institution. And we speak to that understanding of that work there. Let me not get sidetracked because I can. In our collection, we have this amazing collection about Hote Casella, and it's actually an archival mystery. And one of the things about archives that come from small communities and from maybe small institutions early on, but this is a culturally specific archive that is for Indigenous documentation and representation. And because we didn't always have staff to do the work, we kind of end up with mysteries. And one mystery happened is we found this big box of music scores, and we're like, why are these here and who do they belong to? And we thought at first maybe they belonged to Princess Redwing because she played the piano and maybe they were hers. But then as we went through this huge box at the very bottom, we found these PR posters of Hote Casella. And we're like, oh, maybe these are hers. But we're like, why do we have them? These were professional PR posters. So we're like, why do we have these? Time went by, maybe a month or more, and we stumbled on these lacquer discs, and they were of her music. But again, we still didn't know why she was here and why she was connected. Tony did a lot of research, found very, very little online. We went to one of our past directors, who was a volunteer director in the 70s, and she's like, oh, no, she came here to the museum and presented back in the 70s. And she represented Tomaquag Museum, but it was actually off-site in the town of Westerly at one of the theaters there. And so we're going along, we're finding more. We found news clippings that told stories about the event that she did here at Tomaquag Museum. Then we found call records and notes about the correspondence to get her. And then lastly, when we weren't even looking for it, we were looking for a different picture in our vast collections of photographs. And when I say looking, I'm talking about tangibly looking. They were not digitized. We came across this image of, actually multiple, of Redwing and Hote Casella. And so we had this amazing mystery that took place as to why this woman, who was a contemporary of Redwing, that was also born in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and had toured around. She was a mezzo-soprano singer and performer, but she was weaving into this contemporary sort of classical music style these stories of Indigenous life. And when you think about it, when she was doing that, Redwing was also doing that through storytelling, through traditional singing, through her representation of culture. And they both lived in a time when it was not acceptable by the general public to be Indigenous and to just accept indigeneity. And so there was sort of this theatrical representation through storytelling and classical music and other kinds of performance art that then became a way, sometimes even pantomime and sign language and things like that, that became the way in which we could express ourselves in the early 1900s. And so these things are represented in our collection. We have lots of photographs, originals, negatives, digital, all kinds of, film and things of that nature. These two pictures, the one at the bottom with the Wetu or traditional home is Princess Redwing at our original Tomaquag Museum, probably in the 1959, 1960 time period. And the other picture, the person on the left holding the drum is my great grandmother, and her picture is in, many of them are in the archives, and she also, some of her belongings are in our collections. Some of her belongings were transferred into other family members, namely me's belongings, and I had a childhood vest and skirt that was made or adorned with her beadwork from one of her dresses that had gotten, maybe stained or ruined and got cut apart. And so we have her original leggings that match it. And then the new iteration, for her great grandchild that are in the collections now today. And so in here, we're speaking to how this article, which was referenced before, we did this abstract and article for how we've always done Decolonizing Tomaquag Museum's management policy. Interestingly enough, we always just had a draft. It wasn't until about a year ago that we actually got a formal adopted policy. And part of the reason was that collections policies are colonized. The perspective of them are from an elite colonizer perspective, but that wasn't how we always did things. So we kept doing decolonizing and indigenizing work in the museum and in the archives, but we couldn't seem to agree on a policy that worked for us. And recently we have adopted a policy. Just to give you an idea, I mean, I could talk about just the policy for an hour, but I'll give you just a couple of quick examples. You might have noticed I keep calling things belongings. So instead of holding up this pot and calling it a object or an artifact, we call it a belonging because it belongs to someone. It was made by someone. It's connected to a community, a culture, and so forth. So that is one of the ways that we decolonize. So we call our things our belongings. Instead of calling something ethnographic, we call it enculturative. That's our word for it. And because it means us studying ourselves versus someone studying a culture and community of people. Instead of archaeological, we call it ancestral or ancient belongings. Instead of calling it art, we call it culturally informed expression. So that's just an example of what we're getting at in the relationship to decolonizing policies and thinking about things. There's many other aspects of our policies that we decolonize. An example might be what can be touched and why, and when, because in standard policy practice, you just put your gloves on and you never touch it with your fingers. And there's other times culturally where it would be really important and appropriate for you to touch things. It's also about who has access to what. In our collection, there are things that are restricted. The general public can't have access to everything. Some things are just for the community because they might be sacred or they might be very specific to a community. An example might be tribal governance documentation. Someone donates their whole collection, they don't sort through it, and we end up with tribal government documents that are internal. Those are only for other people internal, the serving on tribal governance. So that kind of an example. We also do a lot with decolonizing our library, and part of that is just buying lots of native authored books. We love books, and today there are more and more native authors. And so we've been doing more and more collecting of native authored books, from children's books to adult books. But even more so, we have been doing more and more book projects to increase our voice that's out there. Several of our staff have written in partnerships with books and book projects, as well as in newspaper articles and magazine articles, to create this energy of Indigenous voice. Recently, we started an Indigenous writers circle to kind of really perpetuate that. We're just starting to grow that, but those are the kinds of things that we're trying to do. We have, partnered in From Slaves to Soldiers, the 1st Rhode Island Regiment in the Revolutionary War, Dawnland Voices. Of course, this book that I'm showing you right now, The Key into the Language of America, to name just a few. So we're also talking about, through our archives, writings that we have in our archives. I'll give you something that I don't know when it will be published, but we're talking about Redwing, Princess Redwing, who was the original first person voice of this museum and our original curator and educator. And really, we often refer to her as a co-founder, and it's because initially Eva Butler founded the museum, then Eva Butler passed away, and the museum could have became nothing in 1969, 1970. And Princess Redwing took the museum. She could have taken the belongings and just kept them herself because they gave them to her, but she didn't. She came and reopened a museum and curated and led the museum from that point forward to the 80s when she passed. But we have all these beautiful poems that she's written all over the place, and it'd be really great, and lots of other writing that would be really great to turn into a book. So that's something that we're dreaming about doing, is starting with maybe one of her poetry books. Through that, we do a lot with exhibit design, whether that's using photographs and documents and things from our archives for our exhibits, but also the way that our exhibits are written. It's from a first person perspective. All of our educators are Indigenous, and all of them are sharing a first person story and narrative based on the facts that are represented for each exhibit. One of the things that we've been doing a lot with supporting and advocating for other museums, because obviously if you're not a culturally specific museum, you can't always do it first person, but how you can infuse that is by partnering with Indigenous communities around you to have quotes and writing that's from them. Sometimes you can subcontract with them to be the writer of the text language. I did that at RISD for some text for the painting that is called the Sachem painting that from my perspective is from Sachem Ninigret. And so I decolonized that label and wrote it from a first person perspective. So that's what you can do in a non-culturally specific museum, but you can also use art that's from the Native community. This on the left happens to be a collage by Tall Oak Whedon, the late Tall Oak Whedon, that is speaking to the Declaration of Independence and the idea of the appropriation of land or dispossession of land, and about the fact that we're not all created equal. And even though it was written in that way that we should be, Indigenous people were dehumanized, vilified, and demonized in that context. So we speak to those things in exhibit design. Of course, we have amazing belongings. There's a Birch Bark macaque that tells our stories. We can talk about traditional ecological knowledge and tell our stories about deep science and engineering skills that it takes to make a macaque, about the relationship with birch and whether that's harvesting the birch to make a macaque or a birch bark canoe, or the birch sap for a drink, or the birch burl, if you will, for chaga, which is a medicinal or wellness drink. All of these things are part of telling our stories, and it's really important for us to do that. In the left side, it's showing wampum. It was part of a wampum exhibit that we had, and it was going from the shell and thinking about the food and the food processes to the beauty of wampum art and culturally informed expression today through jewelry, through adornment, but also the significance and meaning of wampum through honoring and ceremony and trade and alliances and historical documentation and the like. And so all of that is encompassed into this work. And so each exhibit we do, whether it's a partner exhibit or one that's here at the museum, is really decolonizing and indigenizing spaces. So if you weren't familiar with the Climates of Inequality exhibit that was from the Humanities Action Lab, it traveled not only across this country, but to France and the islands and some places in South America, I believe. But myself and Ron Potvin, we co-taught a class at Brown on environmental justice and Indigenous rights. And the students created a section of this traveling exhibit that was focused on amplifying Narragansett voices on land and survivance. And it was looking at our stories, telling our stories, hearing our voices. There was oral history. There were films that were created that were decolonizing spaces. It was talking about memorializing and what happens when we memorialize and who gets left out of those stories and how is it represented. And so decolonizing or indigenizing representation is who has the voice. I always advocate for people, if you're going to do exhibits that are about Indigenous people, that you invite them to the table, not just at the end to invite them to the exhibit, but at the beginning. Best practices, you invite and have an advisory group of Indigenous people. And there are many Indigenous people that are working in other museums and other arts and culture related organizations that could be on your advisory committee. You can then, from that advisory committee, you can sometimes glean out who might be someone that you subcontract with, whether that's to write labels or do training videos or to do art for the exhibit, cultural expression for the exhibit, etc. So these are all things that can be done. You can get oral histories from people from those things. Do remember to remunerate folks for their expertise, but that's a great technique and the best museums do that. And that's how you gain a lot of first person voice, but it also is how you gain an audience and a relationship with the community that you're trying to represent with the belongings that are in your collection that are reflective of their community. Many people we talk with that go, oh, well, we did a Native American museum exhibit, but nobody came that was Native American. And it's like, well, did you invite them ahead of time? Were they part of the process? How do you know that they are in agreement? Sometimes people think they're doing the right job in representation, but they're doing a third person perspective, and often, although well-meaning, representing the history from a conqueror's perspective, and also exacerbating stereotypes and misconceptions and biases without meaning to, but it's what we've been indoctrinated into here in this country. So it takes a lot of work. It's really important for us. We had the greatest opportunity to have away from home the Native American boarding school stories here. It was a traveling exhibit. The exhibit itself came and it was fully intact, but we supported it with local experience, giving first person perspective around boarding school, industrial school, and religious schools that were going on here from the time of contact through really 1978, and also the perspectives of education even today and how that is not inclusive for Indigenous people. So we were able to make those connections, share that historical context, and share blog posts that tell more of the story. So these are things that we can do to support exhibits, and you can lean on your Indigenous educators in your region to support you in doing that kind of work. We do lots of special projects. This is the Narragansett Dawn. It's a very important news periodical in our region here that was created in the 1930s and 40s. And recently we created a new index and inventory so that people can actually go. It's got 2 volumes, but I think it's something like 30 individual booklets. So there's a lot in there. And so now you'll be able to search the example, Ellison Tarzan Brown. He shows up a lot in every single one because it was in his heyday when he won the Boston Marathon twice and was an Olympian. So he's in there a lot. And so it focuses on the people, the places, the dates, the events, and that way people can, researchers and our own selves can find it as a museum to tell those stories. And there's lots of contributing writers to this, so it's really important voice for our community. This was another special project that we did that is very connected to using our archives and collections for other partner projects. The University of Rhode Island, with their Department of Archaeology and History and Anthropology, we created a walking tour telling the history of the campus. And in it, they also borrowed belongings from our collection for not only this little brochure that was created, but also for films that were created later, because it started as a walking tour, then it became a 1-credit class, and then it became something also for alumni in a virtual setting. So it's all these opportunities to use our archives and our collections and our educational knowledge to enhance learning for the public. So I don't know, I feel like I went very fast. However, I don't seem to have a clock and have absolutely no idea what time it is, but I have other things I will show you beyond this PowerPoint. So what I'm going to do is talk about this for a moment, and then we'll maybe take a few questions, and then I will show you some of the other things that are not in the PowerPoint. So people are wondering about the dream of Tomaquag Museum. So we are knee deep in pre-construction processes. Matter of fact, the architectural and engineering plans for buildings 1, 2, and 3 are in with University of Rhode Island, and then go to the state for approval over the next 8 or 10 weeks. And when those are done, then we will hire our contractor and break ground sometime this summer of 23. The main building, the first one here, is the main museum building. Half the building is the exhibit galleries, which is about 3 times bigger than what we currently have. Then it has a museum store. There's the entry gallery, which will be for contemporary art exhibitions and or partner art exhibitions. So for example, the South County History Center, one of our partners, they have an amazing collection that's by Kenneth Mars, who's a Narragansett, but he was a photographer, and he took pictures of all kinds of things and peoples and places in South County, Rhode Island, southern part of Rhode Island. And they have that collection there. And so we were talking about maybe one of the first shows in that contemporary gallery might be the photo show that he would put on. Another thing is that they also have a collection that is a photographic collection that was by a non-native person, but the subjects were all Narragansett stonemasons. And so that might be another one that we could show there, as well as contemporary artists that are working today, Lorén Spears and Deborah Moorhead, and all the different 2D artists that are out there in our community. And we work with more than 30 local Indigenous artists within our museum store, and probably more than 50 with our vending and other partner exhibit opportunities. But these are really important for our collection as well, because we've been doing a lot of work via our Indigenous empowerment program. We have been doing a lot of artists in residencies, and along with those artists in residencies, we've started making it our policy to acquire at least one piece from each of those artists to be part of our collection. So that expands our collections and starts telling our story of what's going on in the early 21st century, because it could be that you forget to do that, and then all of a sudden you have big gaps in your collection over time. Our next building is our education center, which has 2 big classrooms and a demonstration kitchen. Over here is our Indigenous Empowerment Center, which will have our quick bite eatery, which will have connections to Indigenous foods, and it will have the artist in residency studio and the workshop and classroom spaces. Of course, there's offices in both these buildings. And the last one is the Archive Research Collections Research Center, which will have obviously the archives and the collections, the library research space dedicated for researchers to be able to work very efficiently in our space, which is not so easy now, although we probably have somewhere around 30 researchers every year, even in our very difficult spaces and places. Could be more, but about that would be a good average. This will also include an entry gallery exhibit in the Indigenous Empowerment Center. There will be an exhibit space for the artists in residence. In the Education Center, there will be some small exhibit to get classes connected to the museum before they go into the museum proper. And outside in the landscape, there will be a mini village that will be cultural expression, but both historically represented as well as contemporary representation. There will be masonry stone walls and things on the inside of the courtyard as well as on the outside. There will be indigenizing the landscape with the plantings so that we have learning all throughout the campus. This is the master plan, so there's a lot of details that this does not show, but it shows you how it will become a place of learning both inside and outside. There'll also be art, sculptures, and things like that in the landscape. Everything, not necessarily day one, but we have plans for them. So as we unfold and get to the new space. There's also lots of partnerships that we've done. I'm going to show you a couple of them when we're off the PowerPoint as well, but Rhode Island Memories is an example of one with the Providence Journal. We did 3 sets of them, and each year they had photographs from our archives. It started with the early years, which were before like 1920, I think, and then it was the 20s or 30s and 40s, and then 50s to today or something like that. And so we had things that were contributed to that. We've partnered with many people using oral histories and photographs and resources from our collection. And these are just a handful of them to give you an idea. And then, of course, there's lots of resources, which I'm going to share with you more when we're outside of this screen. So I was hoping we maybe could ask a couple questions, and then maybe from there, I will also pop over and show you some of the things that might answer some of the questions and share some of those other resources and places.
So we have some questions in both the Q&A and the chat, and I'm happy just to read them to you if that is the easiest way. Yeah. All right. So we'll start with the question in the Q&A from Kelly Clore. Through a decolonized lens, what does provenance look like in comparison to traditional archival theory?
So yeah, so we very much like, you know, when you think of provenance and like where something comes from, I mean, we are very much looking at like, what is the community? How does it relate to the community? How does it belong to the community, right? So again, I can look at a belonging, and in a maybe more Western way of thinking of things, it's often about who donated it and about how it was collected and things like that, where we're reversing that and we're like, if we can figure it out, and even if we can't, our goal is to look at what is the story, how does that story connect to our communities, Indigenous communities, and when we know it specifically, you know, who was the artist or culture bearer that created such a thing? How does it relate to the community? Is it something that everybody is connected to in some kind of way? Like, I'll give an example. So there's a canoe in our exhibit right now. It's a Birch Bark canoe that was built in the 1840s. It's a Narragansett canoe. It came down through my family line. So my grandfather had the canoe. My grandmother actually donated it to the museum because my grandfather passed away in 1984, and she donated it maybe 10 years ago. But the canoe was made by my grandfather's great uncles, right? So that's the documentation that we have. It was donated via Eleanor Dove, but it was her husband's, so Ferris Babcock Dove. And so the uncles are from that Babcock line. But when you talk about community, there's lots of people that are related to those uncles, right? So even though I can tell that first person story because it's my grandfather and my grandmother, but it's very much connected to the community. And there's lots of people that can be connected to and proud of and feel that kinship with that belonging. And so I think that we spend a lot of time telling those stories, but in our educators, say we have an educator that isn't from my direct family, but it's still connected to them because it's something from the Narragansett Niantic community. It is still, even if they're Wampanoag or Nipmuc or Pequot or Mohegan, they're still from this region, or even up in north in Penobscot past Inequality, they're still an eastern woodland nation. So they have a similar canoe. So there's that understanding, there's the connection to the land and the landscape. And so the provenance is very wide and the story around it is very wide and connected to our communities. You know, we certainly want to get as much documented knowledge as we can, but we also know that stories can unfold. One of the big things that we do is we bring a lot of elders into our midst. We just did a thing in the fall, early fall, with a bunch of elders telling stories about collections that are in our collection that were connected to them when they were young, so that we could get those stories documented. And then from there, they spun off into other stories in other places related to the museum, related to our communities, related to the work that they do.
Awesome, thank you. So I'm now going to ask you a question that I've kind of formulated, and with the help of Diana a little bit as well. But can you speak more to how you kind of have chosen your decolonizing terminologies for how you describe your collections, and if there's any kind of technical infrastructure or metadata schema that you've created to be able to describe those in a way that could be kind of utilized by other museums or different institutions?
So I am not the expert on metadata because, you know, I'm not the archivist or the collections manager, although I am part of it big picture. We are still working towards that, again, because we're a small institution and everything that we have is not as perfect as we'd like it to be. But what we've done is we happen to use Past Perfect museum software. And so through that, in different places, we're able to add in some things. There are some fixtures that are in there that are locked in there. However, like some of the nomenclature that I just said to you earlier about calling something belongings, like those words are not in Past Perfect. But one of the things that we're working toward, one is over time, our goal right now was to get things in a system and not have it where it wasn't in a system. But we are using we are talking about TK labels, traditional knowledge labels, if you're not familiar with them. So we're talking about that. We've been aware of that for a while, but it seemed pointless to go to TK labels if we didn't even have a full inventory, right? So our goal, number one, was to get a full inventory just on the belonging side and not on the archival belonging side, because that's so much more vast, right? So we were like, let's just, if we can get a handle on that. So right now, our biggest goals have been really around just getting some kind of digital documentation so that we could use our collections and archives much better for our own selves as well as for researchers. And then eventually we want to merge the system into something that speaks the language we speak more fluidly. An example I can show you if I show my screen real quick again. Of some things that we've been trying to do in order to make things more available to the public while we're not quite ready to open up our Past Perfect to the general public yet. We're getting closer and closer, but we're not quite there yet. We have been creating an archival research space on our website where you can do some archival research within ours, but we also put a lot of our partners that have similar collections that, or similar is not the right word, complementary collections. And so we've been adding them in. So then we go down here and we have Eva Butler, Red Wing, Chief Stronghorse, Hote Casella, Dovecrest, just to give you a couple. So I will just, and then so then you can click on here and you can see the finding aid, or you can select the sheet music and so forth. So some of them have the finding aid visible, some are still in process. This is giving you some examples of what's here. This is not even like close to everything that we have, but giving people an idea. That was one way that we were trying to make things much more accessible. Another way was through our blog, and here is the StoryCorps. So we won the national medal in 2016, and part of the gift that you get for winning the national medal is the opportunity to do StoryCorps. So in 2016, we had 36 Narragansett people from youth to elder that talked in two-person teams on StoryCorps. But the problem was we had it, but we didn't know what was on it. And so now one of our student interns, Ryan, did a finding aid for StoryCorps so that now you can know, and all the keywords like all the people, places, and major events are mentioned. So you can see just on this first little bit, Indian Church, Frank Nichols, military, Ellis and Tarzan Brown, clam bakes, art and painting, military, just on that first page, what is available. So that just gives you a little idea of some of the things that we've been working on to create accessibility to the public through our blog, as well as through our archival page on our website. So I don't want to not give you a chance, because I could show you 20 more things that I put up there, but I want to make sure I can answer some of the questions too.
Thank you. And I'll throw it over to Diana to go to the chat questions.
All right, so our next question from Ellen is, do you collaborate with other Indigenous museums and peoples to share ideas and examine similarities or differences between different kind of cultural approaches?
Oh, most definitely. We're really been working closely with a lot of local museums, but also national. As you mentioned before, we were at the Association of Tribal Archives, Library and Museums, because that's where you can go and talk and interface about what you're doing. We're always, but not just Native museums that have Native collections as well. And we're always working with them to decolonize the work that they're doing or indigenize the work that they're doing. And so an example is right now we've been working with a Mashantucket Pequot Museum, and we've been talking about that through how do we better, we were actually doing it through a lens of how do we better train our education staff to be able to come in and be ready. So in the process of that, we were talking a lot about decolonizing. And one of the things that we've decolonized recently is King Philip's War. They keep blaming poor King Philip or Metacom for the war. It's not his fault. It was the War of New England. And so we've started terming it the War of New England, formerly known as King Philip's War, because that was really what was happening. They were trying to create this new England. And in order to do that, they had to break the power of this place that is now called Southern New England to Northern New England. That war went from Southern New England up through Northern New England over about 4 or 5 years. And that was the goal, was to break the power, to create this new place for those people that were coming here. And so we're constantly working on decolonizing terms. And, when colleagues are working together on various kinds of, educational and curation and, thinking projects, you're always thinking about these things. And we catch ourselves, even as Indigenous people, realizing we've been grown up in a space where we're colonized, that we catch ourselves using colonizer language, even as much as we think about decolonizing and indigenizing vernacular. It's very easy to miss something. And that's an example of one of those things that recently we're like, why are we saying that? Why do we keep reinforcing that? It's not what it should be. And so we're always doing that kind of work. And, our neighboring Indigenous museums and organizations. We work with, Mashpee and Aquinnah Cultural Center, Pequot, Mohegan. When Shinnecock had their museum, we worked with them as well, even beyond that. But, we are always trying to work together, and there's not enough of us, and there's not enough voice, and there's certainly not enough education that lends this important lens on archives, collections, and decolonizing or indigenizing those spaces and places and getting that voice out there. So there's a lot of work to be done, and there's really not enough of us doing it. And so all of us have a big lift. All of our organizations, whether that's Agamau Educational Initiative, we're always sharing things back and forth, but we're also passing people work, because sometimes we just can't do it all. And sometimes other people have an expertise in a different area that would be the better fit. And so we pass that along to who's the best fit.
Wonderful. Okay, so the next question is from Danielle Davis. So can you speak to how planning for the Tomaquag Museum's physical spaces were developed and who was involved in the planning? Also wondering if you have a sense of which of the spaces the community is most excited about.
So that's a great question. I don't know if I know which one we're most excited about. We're excited about the whole thing, because we think of the whole campus as the museum. It's not one building, and nor is it just the campus, because it radiates beyond. We've always gone offsite to do programming. We, of course, in this digital world, we do programming all the way to California in virtual spaces. So I think that we have, our architectural team from Frank Copperwitz architectural firm. There's the landscape architect, all the different engineers that are there, civil and what have you. There we have Keo Construction, who is our owner project manager. We have Libby Slater, interior design. We have Crown exhibit design firm. So we have a very vast, complicated team. Each of those teams have teams upon teams of people. It's been a process. I mean, we've been working on it for a long time. We finally got our license agreement with the University of Rhode Island. So that's another whole team that's part of this. And that happened in the summer of 2020, right as the pandemic was just, but we still just, kept working toward it. We have our campaign consultant and manager, Michelle Berard from, I can't even think of the name of her business at this moment, but, so we have that team. We have amazing volunteers that are part of our advisory, the Native American advisory, but also expert advisories for the campaign and for, the case and all of that kind of work that has to be done. I mean, it's a big, big project. Our ultimate goal is $11 million. We're at about 3 million right now in our fundraising. And our next benchmark is 5 million by end of, late spring of 23. And that will get us ready for the first shovel in the ground for groundbreaking in the summer of 23. It's 2 phases. Well, I mean, it could be 4 phases, but in theory, it's 2 phases. The first 3 buildings will be A, B, and C will get done. And then there'll be, we can open. And then phase 2 will follow with the Archive Collections Research Center. And that was very strategic because you can't use the archives and collections for exhibit design if it's all crated up to be moved into a new space. So we thought it made sense. And it also strategically helps us with fundraising as well, to be able to do it in parts and not try to get to the whole lift right off the bat. It gives us a little bit of a breather for that. So it's a very exciting project. I mean, that has a lot of pieces, and I could share more. Someone can reach out if they really are interested in a lot more of that detail. We're always willing to share what we've learned along the way. If you're thinking about a project, and you're a small institution like us trying to go from tiny to medium, we've been doing a lot of ramping up. I mean, before the pandemic, we were 6 staff. And we are currently 15 staff. And so we've been doing a lot of growing and a lot of strategic planning around departments and systems and processes. When we move into the new museum, we will be 25 staff. That's a lot of growing in a short amount of time. And that's like 2 more years from now. That's what we'll look like. So, and that doesn't include consultants and other kinds of external contractors. That's just staff. So that's, it's a lot of things. I don't know if I answered that fully, but hopefully I did. Any other questions?
I'm going to generalize Ellen's other question, which is, who are your visitors right now, and who do you want them to be in your sort of dream vision for this new space?
I love that. Yeah. So our visitorship, we've always been very unique in that we really target a lot of different people. So we do the preschool set with our story time and that kind of thing, preschool, young children. We do pre-K to grade 12. We do lots of college students. We do a lot of adult programming. So we really do the gamut from, early childhood all the way up to elders. And I hope that we continue that. When we have been planning that, we drive all our consultants nuts because they keep trying to whittle the audience. But the reality is this museum is really unique in that it tells a really unique story, and that everybody needs to know about that. And there's lots of ways to engage in that, whether that's Children's Hour or whether that's school direct tours and programs, or whether that's offsite where our education team goes to their school. There's cultural competency and professional development that we do for other museums, other institutions and schools and colleges and businesses and what have you. There's a lot that we do with college students and adults that are maybe more of a talk or a lecture versus a program. But, it's interesting. We find that when people come with their children to Children's Hour, it's targeting the, young children to early elementary kids, because we, as Native people, we do everything intergenerational. So we kind of create those programs so they're intergenerational. And I find that the adults will say to us, oh, we learned so much. It was for the children, but they still learned because they didn't know Narragansett language. They didn't know about traditional ecological knowledge. They didn't know about the history of the culture or whatever it was that you were presenting. And so even when you're introducing it through a children's book, that's not something that's in their known understanding of the world. So everybody learns something. And we have a lot of adults that tell us they watch our Children's Hours on our YouTube page, and they get so much from it because we're doing language, we're speaking in our language, we're representing culture, but it's in small bites, because it was targeting children, but it's still knowledge that people don't know. One of my favorite ones that Silvermoon did, it was called Making a Salad, and it was using traditional ecological knowledge. And she was outside with her 5-year-old child, and they were going around the yard and picking all these edibles in the yard that could become a salad. And so they were demonstrating that and cleaning it and setting it up and then eating it for the Children's Hour. And she had turned that into a book. And so it was this beautiful representation that people really enjoy. So I think there's lots of work that we do. And in our new museum, the thing that I think that I would like to see is just, we're in a very remote rural space. So volume of schools with bigger class sizes will be able to accommodate, which we can't accommodate here. We have to take, when you're on site, has to be small numbers. So bigger numbers of access for school groups and things like that, but also tour buses that can come through during the tourist season that, we've done hit or miss over the years, but it's hard because we're really off the beaten path, it's felt like to them they were going way off before they could get to the next big destination, Newport or wherever, right? So that I think is really important. But I also think for the Native community, having the Indigenous Empowerment Center where they can have a space to go to continue to pass on these traditional knowledges to the next generation. The public gets access because they get access through exhibits. They get access because artists do demonstrations. Some of those artists will teach classes for the general public. They'll interface with school groups and tour groups. There's all of that happening, but there's also some things that are just for the Native community that you only see through the exhibition of these things. So if they're teaching, I don't know, I'll say twining to the Native community, which is a very traditional style, that's something that we're learning and passing on to the next generation through that work in Indigenous empowerment, but yet you get access to it through exhibition and through demonstration and other kinds of, or an artist talk, things like that. So there's so much that I look forward to that, because right now we don't have a designated space for that. We just kind of have to multitask spaces. So when we were doing our arts and wellness series, you know, we have to break it down, put it up, break it down, put it up. And we don't have a space where something can just be. And we don't have a space for our artists and residents now that could go in a studio and work on a project while they're being an artist in residence. They still have to do whatever they're doing elsewhere and just kind of drag it here for whatever they're doing. We really look forward to that opportunity. And more than anything, we look forward to people coming and meandering the pathways and going through the gardens and looking at the art and the sculptures and the exhibitions that are not just in the museum gallery itself, but in the space. And I can't wait for you to all come and sit and have tea with me at the, we haven't named it yet, but we'll call it a cafe, where there's this gorgeous courtyard where we can sit outside and have a little something and think of, you know, maybe try a Johnny cake or have a succotash or have venison stew or some kind of thing like that, that you can try some Indigenous foods, some that you're familiar with and some maybe that would be new to you, and have those opportunities where we're harvesting from our myriad of gardens, including our Three Sisters garden that will be there, that could be part of the foods that are in the cafe that people can buy at the farmers/Indigenous arts market that, you know, we can dream up when we get there and that you can come to every summer. So we look forward to all those great things that will come, to have, you know, all of you interact and, you know, do films. Like we've done films here, but we don't have the space to do them regularly. So to be able to do things regularly and not just worry about when the weather's nice and we can use our outbuilding because it's warm, and you know, sometimes the outbuilding's too warm in the dead of summer. So, you know, we have these problems that hopefully having, you know, a new facility where everything is climate controlled in a way that it can be hot in the winter when it needs to be and cool in the summer when it needs to be, and people can engage in all kinds of ways, and that there's plenty of places that school groups can go have their lunch, which here that has always been a challenge. There's plenty of parking, which also has been a challenge. You know, we've made do for 64 years with lots of things that weren't perfect, but, you know, Indigenous people are very scrappy and adaptable. So we've done what we had to do in the spaces that we had to do them in. But I think we're at this place that it's time for us to have the place that will be that cultural destination that everybody wants to go to when they're in Rhode Island. And when they're not in Rhode Island, they're going to want to come visit us virtually, and still be part of our community.
Wow. Well, we're all so excited for this. And, you know, we're already planning our trip. So
thank you so much.
And what a kind of important, powerful note to end on. So thank you to everyone so much for coming. I'm sorry we didn't quite get to all the questions. We had a lot of wonderful questions, but thank you all for being here. This has been recorded, so we'll have that on our site with Lorén's permission. And we're so lucky to have been able to have this time with you and to hear about this exciting work. So thank you so much.
If you want to share contact like to the museum with them, I don't know if we shared our website, tomaquagmuseum.org, or the museum phone number. If like someone's like, oh my God, I need to talk to her about whatever, you know, they can certainly reach out. My email is, you know, is easy too. It's my first and last name at tomaquagmuseum.org. So they can reach out that way as well.
That's very, very generous. Thank you so much. And thanks.
Oh, you're welcome. Take care, everybody, and happy holidays. Winnie Nakomo.